Welcome everyone to Talking Niagara this morning with me, Peter Giblett, and him, Dave Wheeler. Hey, Dave, how are you doing?
Not bad, not bad. But before we go on, I have, I have to fix something that I said a couple of days ago.
Oh,
Okay, now this is going to be a very, very rare event. This is going to be a very, very rare event because I made a mistake, which is a very, very rare event. So when I said that the Hamilton Tigers, when I said that the Hamilton Tigers went down to New York and became the New York Rangers, they became the New York Americans. And I knew that I don't know how I messed that up because the New York the franchise
that
the Hamilton
franchise no
Tigers
longer exists.
eventually yeah, well the New York Americans is a story unto itself. It's a very interesting story, but I made the rarest of things a mistake, and so I just want to set the record straight there.
I knew
And
nothing
that
about
is,
the
and I
history.
have to say it, that is the sixth. Yes,
Yeah, I
and
knew.
um, and the second announcement is, and the second announcement is that is the sixth.
Hey, sorry. The second announcement is
All right, we on now.
we're on. Yeah, I'm just having trouble with the sound.
That's
The
that's
second announcement is I got that. Yeah.
that's the second announcement is that is the sixth mistake I've made since 1977.
You keep a record, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I can't say I'm that perfect. I
Well,
just haven't made
that's pretty
I
obvious,
just
Peter. You don't have to say it; it's obvious.
I it's like yes, I haven't made a mistake in something like 372 years, but hey, who's counting?
Well,
All right.
I think you had a little trouble. I think one of the mistakes you make is math mistakes if you're
That's no math
376 years old.
mistake. No math mistake. Right? Anyway, okay, so moving on. The Prince of Darkness is dead.
Okay.
All right. Ozzy Osbourne
Yeah, you
died
wonder how
yesterday.
it really.
Go on.
Yes, you wonder how he even lived so long.
Yeah, given he was into drink, he was into drugs, and typical everything, um, you know, a high-strung rock and roll star would do, right?
Yes. So I remember Ozzy Osbourne when they began with Black Sabbath. I mean, the guy was a guy that wore a pretty ordinary sweater when I saw him first, or looked at some old. He was just a guy with a sweater who was the front man of Black Sabbath, and they had a pretty neat sound. I remember when they came out and they with their name Black Sabbath, and I thought, well, this is an obvious attempt to get a lot because they know they were going to upset the parents of the kids they were appealing to.
Of course, of course.
So I figured that was an obvious way of getting a lot of attention fast is with their name. Remember, it
Yeah,
had a whole lot more significance back then. People
yeah,
went to church back then.
yeah. And there was also a Black Sabbath symbol that was part and parcel of, became part and parcel of rock, pop culture, didn't it?
Yes, and uh, Black Sabbath is a terrible thing in in religious circles, or even the idea of a Black Sabbath, it celebrates Satan and evils, and that kind of sounds, oh my God, like sort of anti-society sort of thing, but people of real religion, Black Sabbath was a very terrible thing because it celebrated the evils of the world. I mean, the darkest of evils of the world, like the Holocaust and stuff like that. It was just like what the devil did on the earth. So, of course, it was shocking to a lot of people. But on the other hand, even me at that time understood that it was a way of getting a lot of attention. But he made the most of it. He was a really good singer. He really could belt out a good tune, and he's become part of our sort of culture. Very sad to see him go.
Yeah, and he married he married Sharon. He was married to Sharon Osbourne for 40 odd years. They had a lot of children together, and she was a TV personality, British TV personality.
I think she was the daughter of Black Sabbath or Ozzy Osbourne's producer or something like that.
Possibly, yeah. I don't know. Yeah. She was born 1952, and she began dating in 1979. She began dating Ozzy Osbourne. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So I think so they had that TV show. I saw a couple of episodes of it. It was hilarious. The Americans were bumming big time because they never knew what Ozzy said.
Well, I saw one show where he was on a road show. It was a documentary where he was on a road show across America with his son. Very interesting guy. I was never, I have to say that, hey, I was never a Black Sabbath fan, never liked any of that kind of stuff.
I liked some of the stuff. I liked a lot of the music. They had interesting riffs. It had a real good driving beat. I thought they had the formula down pretty good. I didn't think of them as a very sophisticated band, but they were a really good rock and roll band.
Yeah, I have to say, his house is nice. Been past it many times. It's about 20 miles down the road from where I used to live. For some time. It was an interesting house, and from the road it looked spooky, which probably was what attracted him to it.
Possibly, but he was anyway. He was very much an interesting guy. Went through the whole sex and drugs and alcohol and rock and roll and whatever the rock and roll lifestyle portrayed. He was able to establish a family and keep one going. So I have to tip my hat on that. Being a rock and roll star with all the, I remember he was interviewed and he was asked about he'd given up drugs at that time, and he was asked about the temptations. He says, I'm an addict. I'm an addict for life. Of course, I'm tempted every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that interview. Because he actually gave, and that's been repeated a few times since, because it's to drive home the fact that addiction like that is something that's life going, goes on for life.
Yes. Yeah, we had actually on one of our shows, I think someone we know. No, it wasn't on a show. It was anyway. Somebody had said that they stopped drinking at 29. It was a bit of a surprise for people who didn't know her, and she'd been an alcoholic and stopped drinking at the age of 29. And she's our age, basically. So
yeah. And the thing is, he was, I guess, later on in life, he had these number of like Hollywood shows going on.
I don't know anything about that at all, but well, he wasn't the sort of, although I think he's from Birmingham. He had a real broad accent when he talked his normal talk. So he had like a northern accent, I guess you'd call it. I'm not sure.
Midlands accent. Birmingham's an odd accent. Birmingham's an odd accent, but actually the interesting thing is about it is where he used to live in Buckinghamshire. It was just down the road from another place which has real odd accents, which is Luton.
Well, look who come from Birmingham, rock and roll stars. Well, it was Ozzy, the Moody Blues. That was their first home. Robert Plant and John Bonham both came from Birmingham. So they had Birmingham has produced quite a, very good rock and rollers. But anyway, rock and roll aside, let's move on. What do we got?
Yeah. Okay. So efforts to clean up the okay, so hang on a minute before we go into there. Let's talk about, so we got several comments. Morning, Mike. Elected to Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice. Yep, thank you. Lyrics were awesome. So there we go. Mike's a fan. Okay, so moving on.
Yeah, he was a really good frontman. There are very few frontmen that were as good as him.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on, we've got Welland River is tackling European water chestnut. So their attempts to eradicate this ongoing, and basically the European water chestnut was first discovered in the river in 2020, and since then there's been a coordinated effort led by the Invasive Species Center to make significant progress in reducing its presence on the river. And upcoming, there is an event called Paddle with a Purpose, which is between 9 and 11:30 a.m. On what date? Oh, don't know what the date is on that one.
Yeah, it's in the article.
Oh yeah.
Now I gotta scroll down to find it myself.
Yeah.
So okay. 11 a.m., 9 to 11, but it doesn't give me the date. It says Paddle Palooza runs from 9 to 11:30.
July 26th. There we go.
Okay.
9 to 11 a.m. There we go.
Now, apparently, there are small populations of this still stuck in the Welland River, but it's very important. Chippewa Creek. It's very important to see if we can get rid of that, because if it spreads, it's going to make a mess. What it does is it chokes out other vegetation that is hereby, that is normally here, and they choke them out. They also put seeds. They go into the water, and they're spiky. So if you're like swimming or something and step on them, they can, be quite a problem. And also that they choke the water out and remove a lot of the oxygen, which makes it difficult.
Yeah. And they're not native to this area, so they're a European import, not native to this area, and realistically, we don't want it growing in our environment.
It was introduced to North America sometime before 1879 by a gardener in Massachusetts, and has spread across the American Northeast into Quebec, Welland River, and Lake Ontario in New York.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Mr. Massachusetts, for bringing that here. But people did that all the time here. So we have we have foxes that aren't native to North America. We have ringneck pheasants that aren't native to North America. We have a bunch of things. Starlings. Thank you very much for bringing starlings over, whoever did that. They were not native to America, and lots of plants and things like that have come over and are not.
Yeah, it's more plants than it is the animals that I think the target of trying to actually reintroduce native plants and everything. Yeah, the irony is that, for example, our squirrels, the North American squirrel, was introduced to Britain some time ago. I don't know why. Became an even worse nuisance there.
Yeah, they're a very hardy little thing. Like if you go farther north, it's the red squirrel and stuff like that. But they almost got beat out down here, and they're the indigenous species. But anyway, that's a very good announcement. It's an environmental thing. It's important, but it's nowhere near important about the things that Mike talks about the chemical and sort of other pollution into the Welland River. But it is a kind of a.
Go on.
I thought you were going to say something.
No, I said Mike makes it important that it does not matter what type of invasive species, it's an environmental disaster.
Yeah, but normally, yeah. So but what I was saying that it's important, but not at the level of what Mike was talking about, because we can get rid of the water chestnuts. I think some of these chemicals we may not be able to eradicate for some time.
Yeah, that's another matter entirely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so moving on. Got this the wrong way around. Okay, so Canadian. So Canadian rules determining which guns are allowed and are becoming unpopular with both manufacturers and gun control groups. For example,
okay, this is about guns. This is about. Let's be clear. This is about guns and the legality of guns.
Yeah. Because
right?
the RCMP operates a thing called the Firearms Reference Table, which is a list of which most people would never have heard of, but it's a list of guns that are not allowed to be used here in Canada. So, for example,
the problem here is a legal one, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, for example, this lady who's a competitive shooter utilizes a weapon that is called a Sterling Arms R9 MK1, which is a semi-automatic 9mm rifle, which has basically been banned by the RCMP.
Yeah. Now here it's not officially banned by Canada, but it's on the list that the RCMP doesn't think should be. It's a legal, not legal thing. It's up to the RCMP whether, in their opinion, it is a dangerous weapon. It should be banned, but it's not officially banned. It's very gray area. And what makes this is a problem is that there's a gun manufacturer, and of course, and they've made this particular gun, and they've had orders for it, and it hasn't been on the list prior. But now suddenly it's on the list with not much forewarning. It's been put on the list. So the orders they have made for these guns, the ones that's supposed to be sold in Canada, can't be sold, and the orders would have to come back to the manufacturer, but they haven't got the wherewithal to handle them. And that's the murky sort of decision making on what's a dangerous gun and which isn't, and what should be on this list and should not be, is a bone of contention, particularly for, in this particular case, the markswoman, like a competitive shooter, is a woman, and she used that particular piece, but now she calls it a paperweight because she's not permitted to use it, even in competitive shooting. So this article just illustrates the kind of the very gray areas and the indecisions around it. The RCMP has a list of their opinion. Well, I don't know but they're not officially listed.
Yeah. Calgary-based firearms company Sterling Arms is saying because of this, they're now in crisis mode and have had to lay off five of his 7 employees.
Yeah. Earlier this month, Philistine learned that the rifle had been classified in the FRT as prohibited firearm, as prohibited firearms cannot be legally used or sold. But, and of course, then it's like that's the shooter that I'm quoting there.
Yeah.
But the decision blindsided J.R. Cox, the head of the Calgary-based firearms company Sterling Arms Incorporated, in this, forcing his company into what is described crisis mode. He had to lay off 5 of his 7 employees and had already shipped the MK1 units to dealers when the prohibition hit. So what is the FRT, it says? What is the FRT? The FRT is a database used by the RCMP to help classify firearms. That classification determines whether a gun is non-restricted, restricted, or prohibited. So the reason why I'm reading this off is because it's easier for me to say that than to interpret it, paraphrase it. Yeah. So that because you want an accurate idea of what it is. And so technically the FRT isn't a legal instrument. And this is where I was mentioning before. It's opinion of the RCMP. So technically the FRT, which is this regulate the gun identification, isn't a legal instrument, but instead just a internal RCMP tool based on definitions set out in the Criminal Code and Firearms Act, but in practice. So I don't know. What do you think as a legal eagle? What is this?
I think it's the definition that becomes, because it's semi-automatic. And that's been the target of of some of the bans, has been this question about semi-automatic, because it's a weapon that if you hold the trigger down, you can fire off multiple rounds. Now it's not semi-automatic. As I understand it, it's not a semi-automatic in the way that many rifles are, because you still have to release and pull the trigger again.
Well, one of the things they try to get around this for target shooting, especially, they use pistol ammunition, which makes it less deadly as a rifle.
Yeah.
And it cannot be converted. The semi-automatic feature of it cannot be converted with a bump stock to make it an automatic like they can in the United States. Now, to define FRT is the firearms reference table.
Yeah.
Now, the RCMP comes up with their list based on that. And I guess there's certain criteria that make a gun legal or illegal. But in this particular case, it took them a while to get around to that. So these people are, the Cox's company continued to make them. Now you suddenly get this, well, you can't make them anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's bad news. It's bad news for the manufacturer, who are laying off 5 of their 7 people.
Yeah.
Right, because for them, that's kind of, now they've got to design and build a new, replacement weapons.
Ever since the Chrétien years, they came up with this very restrictive kind of, they were going to buy back all the different guns in the country. It was going to cost $2 million. I remember that, $2 million. I think it's $5 billion later. The the Harper government just put a squash on it and said it like turned it back because it was costing a whole lot of money. They couldn't get the registry program going. It was cost overrun. It was typical government bureaucracy gone to into like the ether of government. So something that should have been very, very simple, where the guns were registered and everybody was worried about the guns. I remember a guy who had a Tommy gun had to give that up, and that kind of thing. But so basically, what you're talking about here is the government messing up again. And here we have this reference table. Now this goes back to the Chrétien years, so you're talking 30 years ago, and they still haven't got it right.
Yeah, and you know how you manage these sort of things. I'm keen that we have a list. I'm keen that we have clarity about what how a gun gets on the list, because you know, I'm sure for a person like this, this lady who's a competitive shooter, clarity is something that she needs.
Well, she could have used the clarity long ago. Obviously, this, in the opinion of the RCMP now, it meets the criteria for an assault weapon or something. It's basically they're saying it's an imitation AR-15. But why didn't they say so earlier? This gun's been around for a while.
In fact, in reality, what should almost happen, what my feeling is that sometime what needs to happen with these sort of things is a gun manufacturer comes up with a new design, and they should deal with the relevant RCMP department to make sure that that it's legal or not.
Yeah. Anyway, what else do we got?
Especially if it's going to be sold on the Canadian market, right?
Anyway. Well, yeah, that the whole thing is that this is kind of like an opinion of the RCMP based on their based on what's set out by legislation, but it doesn't seem to be that clear. If that gun should have been banned automatically somewhere along the line by the government, but the government doesn't know how to walk and chew gum at the same time. So
yeah, I know, and that's part of the problem that we face here. All right, and Mike made a couple of good points there. All right, so moving on. Scott Moe is warning that some UF tariffs are, need to be considered as part of Canada's reality.
He's just repeating what Carney has warned. Carney has warned that it doesn't look like we can get out of this without any tariffs. Their first position was we want to go completely tariff-free with the United States. After all, we have the USMCA. However, so many of the products we sell to the United States, the people who sell them didn't bother to register with the USMCA because of the low tariff rate. It was only about 2%. So if you're sending a product down there and it has a 2% markup because of the tariff, isn't a big deal. So they didn't think it was worth the paperwork and getting registered in the free trade deal. However, that's come back to bite them.
Yeah.
And 60-something% of our exports to the United States are not covered under USMCA. And we actually covered that a couple months ago when we found certain businesses becoming very difficultly strained because they have to pay the higher tariff. And if they had and the reason why they didn't get, and we did report then why they didn't get involved in the USMCA was because of cumbersome paperwork, and little companies didn't think it was worth it.
Yeah, and it all goes to show that actually sometimes doing the bureaucracy matters.
Yeah. So Scott Moe's just pretty much repeating what Carney has warned Canadians about.
We've known this really since we first talked about it. We weren't going to get away with no tariffs at all.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that the U.S. has announced a big deal with Japan. So they threw up like a 35% tariff or on 25% tariff on Japan and Korea when they were already in negotiations. The Japanese thought they had a deal, and then suddenly, in the way Trump works here, they throws another tariff on them. They don't know where they sit, but Trump has to come up with some deals because he's promised all these deals and nothing is delivered. 90 deals in 90 days was just I mean, we know that he was exaggerating in a big way, but we only have a handful of deals out of him. Japan was an important one, but here they've reduced the tariffs of 15% both ways. So stuff coming from the States is a 15% tariff charge in Japan and the other way around. Now, the reason why Japan may have got a much better deal than anyone else is because they hold so much of, I think they're the number one foreign country that owns debt in the United States. So they could do a whole lot of damage by selling the bonds and the treasuries. Mm-hmm. If they started to run and start selling those bonds, it would reduce the price of them. They would increase the price of them. That would be it. Like, so, anyway, the bond would produce, less yield. And I think the Trump administration wisely thought it should disarm that. So it's come up with a deal that probably, when you look into it, it's not going to be a whole lot different. 15% on cars coming in from Japan, and Japan has said it's going to buy more agricultural products and more trucks and things of that kind. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of difference, but Trump had to make that deal because Japan has leverage. We're always talking about the United States having the leverage of its largest market in the world, basically. Well, the Japanese had leverage because they own so many treasuries. If they started selling them off quickly, that would increase the payoff of. In other words, you buy a bond, and it's paying out 4% per year, let's say. But if Japan dumped a lot of these, it would make them less attractive. And in order for you to sell them, you would now have to offer 5% return. And they didn't want that to happen.
Yep. And I don't think those bonds are not held in any great number by Canada.
No. Japanese have made that investment. The Chinese, of course, too. Chinese are letting their bonds go, but little by little. They're not big dumping them. Remember, China at one time was the primary holder after the crash. After the crash in 2008, China was the one that came to the rescue.
Yeah,
they were the ones that bought all the securities that stabilized the American economy. Now, they didn't do it out of the love for the United States. They did it out of the fact that if the United States disappeared as a market, they would be in bad trouble too.
Yeah.
So in order to stabilize the United States, that meant it stabilized its market with the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's of course, then of course, China has sold them on over time.
Yeah. So this deal with Japan is probably the only smart move I've seen with Trump and the trade thing, because Japan has so many of these securities. You have to diffuse the potential of them selling them off. They have leverage over the United States, like the United States has leverage because of this huge market. Japan had the leverage of owning all these treasuries. So they come up with a pretty good deal. It was only 15% both ways. And I thought to myself, wow, that's not bad, because it really does neutralize it one way or another. It won't affect the trade relationship with Japan at all. And the tariffs coming in, of course, are being paid by the American people, so the Japanese don't really care about that. As long as the the tariffs are low enough that their cars can still sell. Now, here's something that was anticipated when back in Trump's first administration, he put a tariff on Korean washing machines. I think it was washing machines and dryers.
Mm-hmm.
So he put a tariff on them in order to stimulate the American production of washing machines.
Yeah.
What happened is when they put that, whatever the tariff was, let's say it was 25%. I can't remember what it was. When they put that tariff on, all other washing machines increased in sale, in value. In other words, the marketers, when these Korean machines were coming in that were tariffed, the companies that sold other ones, domestic ones, raised their prices up to just below the cost of the Korean machines. In other words, it had the opposite effect.
Yeah.
The marketers could see that if they pushed they didn't lower their prices or keep them the same, they knew that the Korean ones were the ones that people wanted. But if you sold yours just underneath that price, so they didn't have to pay the tariffs, but increase their profit margin that way. And that's what's happening now with cars. Apparently, domestic car owners can see that when you have an import coming in, and it is, let's say it used to be $4,000 and now it's $5,000, and your car sells for $4,000, but you can now sell it at $4,700, make that increased profit, and still look as if you're selling it, and still sell it cheaper than the import. Yeah. So what they're doing is they don't have to pay the tariff on the cars that they're selling, but they're selling them at a higher cost. You would think they would try to wipe out the competition by keeping their price where it normally was, but no, they don't. They rise their price up, not as much as their competition who had to pay the tariff, but still they're making extra profit that way.
Yeah.
So that's what happens with tariffs sometimes.
Okay. Anything else on tariffs? It's a subject being killed to death, I think, both generally.
Yeah, it's very interesting to watch. I watch the videos from Fox, and I've watched the videos from other news sources and independents, and there's a vast difference on how they explain the tariffs and what their expectations are from tariffs. If you get like Fox, there's just like, it's senseless even watching them. They just find people to tell them what they want to hear, what the administration wants you to hear. If you do like CNN, they're kind of dumb, and sometimes they make an effort to be a little bit more accurate. Sometimes, if it serves the purpose, and then the best information comes from independent little shows. So you really have to shop around to get a very good idea. Like, for instance, I watched the Fox thing, and they were talking about how great the economy was and everything, and that had to do, the tariffs were helping the economy and all that. And yet another article I watched was about American truck industry and how they're making trucks, how their sales have gone down because the price of steel had gone way up. And it was hard. It was hard for them. They're selling less trucks and building less trucks because the steel price had gone up. The steel supplies they needed, some imported and some domestic.
Yeah.
So there's a variety of different things. So if you want a real, just take your hate of Trump out of it and just look at the economy and as it really is, or your love of Trump or your hate of Trump. Try to get that out of your head and do a little bit of independent searching, and you'll come up with a reasonably good conclusion that there's going to be inflation due to tariffs, but we don't know how much. Right now at this particular time.
Yeah. Okay. Next one. So where we are, Zoom bombings in Ontario courtrooms now means that to some extent, public is being banned from attending proceedings virtually. Now, first word in this one is, what is a Zoom bombing? So I looked this one up. Zoom bombing refers to unauthorized and disruptive intrusion into virtual meetings, often via platforms like Zoom. And then I remembered, there was a story out there that there was a lady who was a witness on a hearing at the Landlord and Tenant Board, and she was sitting on her bed in her bedroom, and then her boyfriend, who was completely naked, reached up and grabbed her while she was giving evidence and made love to her. Right. That was disruptive, of course, and the worst of that is you can't actually turn off somebody's camera. You can mute a person, but you can't turn off their camera.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, but the problem here is Zoom bombing. I'd never heard of it before, but I could see what was happening. It seemed to me that they had no sort of the protocol for Zooming that would avoid this. This would be the obvious thing. To me, it was like the obvious thing that would have had gone wrong is somebody misbehaving on Zoom. But you think they would have some sort of protocol that would screen that.
Well, first of all, typically most courtrooms now, if you go to one of the big problems here is every courtroom. If you go to a courtroom, there's usually a court clerk in the courtroom. In terms of courts, in court protocol, if you do something wrong, likely that clerk is going to be on the phone with the police or with security, court security, and might well be immediately able to have you thrown out. That's if you're in the live courtroom. If you're in a Zoom courtroom, it's a different thing. But the protocol normally is that if you're an observer, you don't say a word. You're just an attendee. But it's the what do you call it? It's the attendees. One of the things that we've had because of the pandemic is people now can attend court, give evidence without being there. And that's been on the rise. But of course, that has also brought with it the ability for people to watch and be, just watch a public court session.
Well, right now they're saying you've got to be, you have a physical presence because the Zoom bombing has gone out of control. So you have too much interference with, sadly, because these are public courts. Yeah. And in the public court, there are methods by which to control the observers. So, well, I think but on Zoom they don't. Now this is a big problem because anybody can go and watch most court cases if they wish. That's open to the public. But when you shut down the means by which most people attend meetings these days or go to events like through Zoom, that kind of restricts public access, which I don't really like. I do not like that.
The irony here, of course, is because of Zoom attendance at hearings, the public gallery is larger than it probably has been in years.
Yes, that's very so, but I would rather them find a means by which they could regulate the Zoom participants to make them to put them on level with the people that attend in person. So if you start to upset things in person in a court, you're tossed out pretty quick.
Yeah.
And the neighbor and the people who are sitting in court with you would be quite angry with you. So you couldn't get away with something like that. You can do it when you're far away on electronics. Unfortunately, they don't have a means by which to regulate. They can throw them out by just putting click and throw them out of the meeting. So yeah. I don't know why they just don't do that.
Well, that's the irony. The software actually does allow you to mute everybody. There's a feature on Zoom, and I'm only talking Zoom here because I know a little bit about it, that allows you to mute everybody. So that's the immediate thing. As soon as somebody states something, you can mute everybody. I don't know whether there was a turn everybody's camera off. I've never had the camera turned off on me, so I don't know.
The other thing is, I think if somebody wants to observe it, there should be an independent channel that just records everything.
Yeah,
that you can watch.
Yeah, in fact, actually, that would be a better thing, that you can still tune in and go watch live, but what you're doing is watching a live recording. That means you have no access to the courtroom itself, and the Zoom attendance should be limited purely and simply for those who have business before the court.
Yeah. So I don't know. I suppose they'll sort this. This is part of modern living anyway.
Yeah, and I think they will sort it out. I think what will happen now is, one of the things that has been proven to be the case is that the courts in Ontario are massively behind the times. They got dragged.
Oh, really?
They got dragged.
Really? You're telling us we don't know? Yeah.
They got dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century by the use of Zoom during the pandemic. And quite bluntly, the courts were actually probably in the first half of 2020 in panic mode about what the hell they were going to be doing about living up to their judicial responsibility and being able to hold court hearings. ETA and Zoom came along, saved the day, but even so, it's still a technology that the courts do not understand, and they need to understand the technology. And I'm not saying that judges need to be trained in how to use Zoom, but court clerks need to be trained in how to use Zoom and manage Zoom.
Well, I could tell you, anytime I've been to court, it seems to me that the principal effort among the judge and the lawyers is to find out ways of not doing anything that day.
I get where you're coming from. I do get where you're coming from, because, yeah, there's been some of those sessions whereby it's like, yes, we're adjourning till the 12th of August.
When I was there a couple of times, it was just adjourn. We're not ready, Your Honor. We're looking for an adjournment, Your Honor. We're looking for a postponement. But again, it was one after another.
But again,
as a matter of fact, I went there to attend a couple of court hearings for a friend of mine who had been in a wheelchair and couldn't get there, and it involved friends or family of him. So I went there, and a couple of occasions, because the case had already been deferred 2 or 3 times, and they figured, well, this time they're going to make a decision. And the lawyer showed up and says, I'm not ready. I need another deferral. And the court judge, he didn't even say, all right, you've already had 3 of them. It just says, okay, move on. Next one. And the leading up to that was the same thing. Massive amounts of deferrals.
Yeah, but typically what happens is in those kind of events, I've been to a few events whereby there were what's called speak to hearings, right? You're speaking to a matter, and essentially when when I've deferred things, it's usually because there's a negotiation going on behind the scenes between the defendant's lawyer and the prosecution.
Well, the cases I was there wasn't, and it was like the third deferral already,
Yeah.
and people
Well,
were the people who asked me to go there were very convinced that finally there would be a decision made on this. It had been going on for over a year, and it seemed to be a pretty straightforward case to me. But in any case, like I said, the number one goal of the judge and the lawyers are to attempt to do nothing that day. Most of the time it works.
Well, but there are some serious considerations, because you've got Jordan considerations to take into account, which is that if a thing's delayed by more than 18 months for provincial offences or summary type offences, then it can then the charge can get waived, or it can be stayed. And if for other criminal matters, you've been charged more than 30 months, they can be stayed.
Okay, what else we got? I think we knocked that around pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on. Our next one is the Gaza death tolls are increasing due to starvation.
Yeah, we mentioned this yesterday. I also mentioned what is put there in the article about, of course, they're focused on a 4-year-old girl that died of starvation. She was bones wrapped in skin.
Yeah.
There are other babies and things in the hospital. They're in the hospital because they're starving, but they can't get baby formula. The IDF is restricting baby formula of all things. What the countries are complaining about is the drip, what they call the drip supply of drip supplies of food. They put a little here, they put a little there. The Israelis are using food as a means of fighting this war. They can't find Hamas. They may have killed a lot. They killed a lot of their leaders, and they may have killed a lot of their soldiers, but they can't find them. And so what they're doing is just blasting the heck. If there's a 1 in 10,000 chance, it seems, that a Hamas fighter may be among those women and children over there, let's kill all the women and children, and maybe we'll get the Hamas fighter. That's almost like the ideas they're using right now. We know that they're shooting everywhere. They're going to do a major assault in one of the towns that has been less affected so far. But when Trump wanted to make that the new Riviera of the Middle East, at that time, he said it's an unlivable place, and the Israelis have done nothing but bomb and blast the crap out of everything ever since.
Yeah.
There is mass starvation going on there. The Israelis seem to be very adept at military operations, disciplined, organized, but they can't organize food.
Yeah.
They can't let food in across the border, and everybody is jelly-backed here. The United States won't do anything because they're all worried about Jeffrey Epstein, that kind of thing. They can't focus themselves, and if it means the slightest criticism of Israel, they can't do it. But I have to tip my hat to CNN, because they're the one. I think it was a CNN, but not an American CNN. One of the other ones actually ran the story of starving children in Gaza, and the sort of gauntlet of death that Palestinian people have to walk through just to find food to bring them to their
CNN
kids.
World Channel. This was on the CNN World Channel. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm afraid that won't often be put out there in America, because America is terrified of criticizing Israel because of the powerful Israel lobby. But I'll have to say that even the American CNN pointed this out. Actually, put it in their papers. You won't get it from Fox because whatever Fox is, I don't know what they are, but I'm telling you, they're weird.
Yeah. Okay. The other part to this one is BBC put out an article by Jeremy Bowen that says Israel's allies see evidence of war crimes in Gaza mounting.
Yeah, the only thing I don't like about that is Jeremy Bowen had to repeat the thing. Every journalist, when it very began, had to make sure they said, well, Hamas attacked Israel, and Israel was responding. So Hamas started it all, and they did so much and so much. They give them almost as much ink as the atrocities that are happening the other way around. But the thing I think I've had 2 articles here, so I think it's Bowen's article, but he does go into the causes and how the Israelis are using food as a weapon, and their lack of careful. They're not being careful at all. They're not the most humane army in the world. I'm trying to remember what he said about it, but it was he went through the history of the conflict. Basically, there are no journalists allowed in there. There was a restriction of food, just restriction of medical aid. They tried to hamstring the UN because the UN was more effective than they were. They did not want the Gazans to get the food from the UNR, but at the same time, because they said, okay, Hamas is going to get the food, not the people, but at the same time, they're doing nothing to do this. Now, curiously, it's not covered that well in the Israeli press and television, and people are largely disinterested in the whole thing. They haven't seen the Western coverage. It's been a restricted media thing. It's kind of like you don't want to see this.
One of the statements that Bowen makes is that Donald Trump is reportedly losing patience with Netanyahu after being taken by surprise when the Israeli leader ordered the bombing of Damascus, attacking Syria's new regime, which Trump had recognized and encouraged.
The problem is Bibi Netanyahu is the boss. He's the boss of Donald Trump. He's the boss of the Senate. And he's the boss of the Congress. Each one of them is terrified of the Israeli lobby. Each one of them will not say a peep, except really brave souls like Thomas Massey, who is a Republican. Most Democrats wouldn't have said boo about Israel before because the Israeli lobby quite often fed them more than they did the Republicans. That's reversing now. But the amount of money that the Israeli lobby can put into removing you from your seat as an incumbent is incredible. Yeah, and that's why nobody wants to say it. They own the Senate and they own the Congress. And
absolutely.
Trump, part of Trump's successes was due to money he got from Adelson, who wanted him to do more and more things in Israel, including moving the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And he did it because of the money they got. But in his own words, they came to visit him every 2 weeks with another request.
Yeah. But another thing here, which our reporter is saying, Bowen is saying, is that lost it. Okay, is that okay? No, can't find it. Where? All right. Yeah, okay. So another joint statement condemning Israel's actions was signed on the 21st of July by foreign ministers from the UK, European Union, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan.
Yeah. Now, this is what they're up against. Israel has also condemned the legal process. Of course, Israel's condemned this statement, but Israel has also condemned the legal process at the International Court of Justice, which alleges that it is committing genocide against the Palestinian. Israel denies the accusation and claims they are anti-Semitic blood libels.
Yeah.
So they're accusing the Court of Justice of anti-Semitism. Not only just anti-Semitism, but anti-Semitic blood libels.
Yeah.
Just sit on that for a while. The International Court, they are accusing the entire court of being anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, and of course, this is not. This story isn't going to go away tomorrow either.
No, it isn't. And right now, Netanyahu, Trump has got angry with Netanyahu first for attempting to bomb Iran after he announced a peace deal. He had to get the Israelis to turn around, and he was pretty fumed about that. Then the Israelis bombed Syria without telling him, and they continue. And then they hit a Catholic church, and now the United States is looking very, very bad because of their supply of a nation that's starving people to death. So even Trump, as callous and cold as he is, and how self-indulgent he is, even he can't view away from this any much longer. But like I say, the Israeli lobby is very powerful, and you don't really hear a whole lot in the Senate or the Congress about this. You hear it in all the other parliaments around, like Ireland, Britain, France, Germany. You hear, not particularly Germany. Germany's quiet. Spain. Everybody in their parliaments have denounced Israel for this, but you don't hear it in the U.S. You hear it from guys like Bernie Sanders or something, but aside from that, it's like see nothing, hear nothing, speak nothing.
Yeah. And we got a problem with that. It's like I'd prefer that they brought it up, even if I can disagree with what they are saying.
And ironically, I think the potential of anti-Semitism will go up when the average person, understands the power of the Israeli lobby and the power it has over their own Congress and Senate. Everybody has to remember that this is not Jews doing this. It's some Jews and some Christian Zionists doing this. I don't know. I'm just afraid of when people begin to understand the power in which the Israeli lobby yields, that they'll get very angry once it gets through there. Right now, the press and everybody else is being happily cooperating with the Israeli lobby and not reporting about their actions too often, but that's about to change. And so I'm afraid of a backlash. I can see a backlash against Israel, but I'm afraid it might spill over into the old anti-Semitic stuff. There'll be real anti-Semitism then, not pretend stuff that they're talking about now.
Yeah.
In any case, I guess we're getting pretty close to the end there.
We should be wrapping this up right now anyway.
Yeah. So don't forget, guys, we just talked about it there. I can't believe it. Every day I say it's getting worse, and I'm not overstating it.
Yeah.
This is not hyperbole. It's getting worse every day. 60,000 people have been killed. Children are starving. Children have been maimed. Women, innocents have been maimed. And yet the most efficient, most effective military force can't find Hamas, can't fight Hamas instead of fighting children. They are at the point where they've been throughout the whole war. They don't know where Hamas is, so they just shoot at everything.